Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome again in the next Frogeex Green Tech live session. Today, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Elvira Rakova here with us. Thank you so much, Elvira, for taking the time and being here with us and chatting a little bit about seaweed and macroalgae and all the applications that are possible and the opportunities in this field.
Hi, Jana. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great pleasure on our side. I mean, it's a wonderful place when you go to LinkedIn and meet people like Dr. Elvira. And just let me give you a little bit of an intro on her background, that you know who you are listening to and what's the elements that we would like to introduce you to today. So Dr. Elvira Rakova is joining us from Algae. The company Algae is a startup aiming to connect the capacity of blue carbon sink methods with the production of useful bioproducts, contributing to the creation of a net zero carbon circular economy with macroalgae. The benefits of macroalgae are amazing, with carbon capture, absorbing heavy metals, and also improving water quality. We can restore the ecosystem and also regenerate the oceans. That's why it's quite an interesting topic also for us. Apparently at Frogeex, we love new materials, we love new applications, especially those, of course, which are sustainable and efficient at the same time. And for Algae, it's a company that covers basically the research, product development, cultivation, and technical support for your product or aspiration, and can help you also with the commercialization, my apologies, of the produce that you harvest from your algae farm. Now, Dr. Elvira, she possesses also a technical degree from the Technical University of Dresden, a PhD over there. And today she's going to brief us on the spectrum of application, a little bit like an intro, like an entry into the topic, that we kind of, get an understanding what is possible, what are the challenges, what are maybe some limitations or some, concerns in the industry. I definitely invite you to join the chat section, comment or ask questions. What would be interesting for you for maybe your project, or if it's theoretical or a research point, just let us know what would be interesting for you. And thanks to all those that are watching the streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You will have also access to the replays then after we finish the live call today. So with this, Elvira, I would hand over directly to you to start with the brief, if that is okay for you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jana. The presentation of Algae was amazing. I think you can do like the pitch deck for us in the future. But let me just go here for all our listeners and viewers today to explain an idea about this, because I'm sure that all the followers of Frogeex are familiar with the sustainable solutions, sustainable products, and the CO2 capture, and of course biomaterials. So I'm also always keen also to follow what you do with the bamboo application. But let's now go from the land where the bamboo grows, we go to the sea. And you know that the sea is unfortunately is the biggest carbon sink, right? So all the CO2 it absorbs from the atmosphere. It absorbs also in the water, and we have a big problem of the helping the sea and restore this. But how we can do this? So on the same hand, we also have the challenges and opportunities now with the climate change. I mean, you know better also than me probably, that we have the rise in demand on the decarbonization, rise in demand on the replacing the fossil-based products by bio-based products, right? And at the same time, we have the environmental responsibility for the big companies. At the same time, there is also energy crisis. So we're all this mess, and we're trying to solve it with a linear supply chain. So we extract the fossil fuels, we process them to put in the petrochemicals in the fuels, and on the side we do the CO2 capturing and offsetting elsewhere. So this is the business model that exists now on the market, and at some extent they work. But at Algiscope, we were thinking how we can transform this linear supply chain into the circular one. So how we can carbon capture from the sea, clean water, absorb heavy metals, creates the regenerative biomass, and then put this biomass through the industrial partnership into the bioproducts by creating local jobs and also scale up those solutions. And our answer is the macroalgae. So macroalgae is the seaweed that grows everywhere we have also opportunity to create the farms with the macroalgae. And what we do at AlgaeScope, so we create products from blue carbon sink. And why? Because first of all, it absorbs a lot of CO2, so it really can restore the ocean. And there are solutions. There are already farms exist where you can invest in the blue carbon economy, and where you can help coastal areas to absorb the carbon from there. It is very valuable biomass because there's been a lot of research done on this, and there are already marketed solution for the biofuels, for the bioplastic, and other materials that I will share with you in a few. And the most important thing that it doesn't compete with the food. So in comparison to the corn or red beet or sugar canes, the algae, of course, we have some algae that are eaten like in Japan, but seaweed has a variety of different seaweeds, and it doesn't compete with food. It's also resource efficient and regenerative, so we can grow it constantly, right? So resource efficient, we don't need to water it. It grows in the polluted areas. It's grows in the 4 months. You can have the full growth biomass, and this is already creates now a very good market for the macroalgae. So macroalgae has a huge market now from the food, fertilizers, feed for animals, and alginate. So for all gels that you use nowadays, there is also the algin set. So it sounds like a fairy tale, right? Too good to be true. So why it's not used nowadays? Let's go a little bit in the product process map where we are focusing on. So we are focusing on mostly on the separating the solid and the liquid biomass, and we don't want, because we don't want to have the waste from this. The liquid one goes basically into the bioethanol. This is our core expertise, bioethylene, biomonomers that can go to the bioplastic and to biofuels from the bioethanol. So you can create monomers from there and create polymers out of this. But at the same time, the solid leftovers, but basically they have also high value. This can go to the fertilizer, to the fibers, and as well as to the building materials. Building materials, it has very nice approach there, because algae, it's a very good fire retardant. So basically you can add a little bit of algae into the furniture, and this is already a natural fire retardant. So this has very interesting properties for this. And basically in AlgaeScope, we do the consulting service. So we create the full circular economy here locally. So we look where and how we can establish the farm of the local species that are not invasive, how we can restore the local area around, and what are the industrial partnerships also in the region are available to create the bioproducts that can be also available for the community there. So it can go from the smaller factories, for the smaller companies that do building materials, for example, and they can just diversify their portfolio, of course, to the bigger companies for the petrochemical industry, fossil fuel industry, that want to diversify their portfolio and include also their algae-based, regenerative-based solutions. So this is basically the idea behind of our service and our expertise. So we are a team of experts that covers material scientists, the aquaculture engineers, and mechanical engineers as myself, farming specialists from Japan. So it's an international team. And well, I hope we can create the value on the market with this.
Amazing, amazing. So, Elvira, would you like to add some other slides, or are we at the end of the presentation already?
We're at the end of the short brief. I think it is
super, super excellent, excellent. Because we already have a question, so let's maybe start with that one.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Peter, for being with us, jumping in. Let's maybe now you can read it also yourself. I will read it out loud for those that listen to us. New local sustainable value chains, not supply chains, value chains. It's the new word. I also like
Yeah.
it. Value chain is the key issue to solve many challenges. Do you offer a low-tech approach to harvest and process macroalgae as well? Thank you,
Yes,
Peter.
of course. So we have this. Thank you so much, Peter, for your question. I also like this word. Yes, we offer. So we have the specialist in the farming as well as in the harvesting and the processing. And this also will depend on how is the biomass is going to be used, because the pre-treatment is important there, right? So high tech in our sense is to main, create the polymers and break down sugars from this and already go into the side of the fuel and so on. But of course, the seaweed market is huge. So because we are establishing our farms mostly like in the Middle East, and we have also farms in Japan and Vietnam with whom we are collaborating also around the Africa. So from different seaweed types, we can create the farming as well as the pretreatment. So, but those technologies, they already exist in the market, and I think they can be used. So the seaweed market is actually fascinating also. So, but we are offering also those low tech solutions.
Great. I mean, this is also very much needed and a great question again, Peter, because it's also a little bit about inclusion, sharing the opportunity, giving access to people. You know, we have a lot of people in Africa that have massive potential. You know, with the land, with the
Exactly.
coastline.
Yes.
We just need
Exactly.
to be very smart how we do it, and kind of also have a very a very open and transparent approach on the sourcing, on the strategic planning. I mean, you know, for the sectors and everything. It's We had last time Rafael Schranz here with us, that is responsible, or you know, in his capacity, working on waste management, waste prevention, circularity business models, or circular business models. And it was a very interesting discussion to see the perspective of the systemic change that we need to kind of really plug this into and make the little wheels of the big machine, which we call economy and ecology as well, which is the baseline for us, that we kind of, you know, benefited from for the past hundreds of years. And now we need to kind of consider that, you know, so and to take care of it, so we can keep on
Exactly.
going.
Yes.
So very,
Our
very interesting.
one of our goals also is to work with the factories, to work with the farms in Kenya and Tanzania to empower women community there, because there are many women that are started to build their seaweed small factories for cosmetics. And I think what we could also do is to create, let's say, the pre-treatment process, like harvest and pre-treatment, and then the scented biomass somewhere else to use it for other materials. So, and this is one of my personal passion of the empowerment of the like smaller communities. So because it can create also the local economy, or create some building materials, for example, out of seaweed. And especially it's perfect for the coastal zones, of course.
Mhm. Thank you so much. So we have some more questions. Let's go into those. When looking through your kind of value proposition on the processes that you take care of, especially, um, what are the species that you kind of focus on? Are there any species that is like your top priority competence, you know, especially good for the application that you were highlighting, or is it like you were open? And can you share with us the species that you are specializing in?
Yes, so I can, of course. So basically, we are researching also a lot on the sargassum. So sargassum most of the time is considered as something bad and invasive. You've heard probably some of the things in the California. It was like a huge pond of sargassum trying like to eat the full the full California coast. So,
Mhm.
but we see sargassum as the available species for monomers for the ethanol production. So, and it grows very fast and it's very resource efficient. Another one is also ulva lactuca. So this is one of the algae. So basically, we focus on the green and brown algae, and as well as like the red one. And the other one is the Kappa ficus. So Kappa ficus is also has very interesting properties that can be used for various things. But what we usually do, since we don't focus only on those, so we come to the region and we see what are the local species there. and
Mhm.
what are the products, what the opportunities this species provide with. So because
Mhm.
the our macroalgae research been here since 60s, 50s, I don't know. I don't want to lie now right now. Anyone
Right.
can check, but you can find all the papers and research on the bioethanol production, for example, right, on the packaging. You have various amazing startups that create packaging, plastic, edible bottles, all possible things nowadays, right? But our core focus is mostly of like creating, putting all the puzzles, pieces of puzzles together, creating the local economy and the opportunity there. So we take what already exists, and then what type of species are in the region, for example, in Gulf region or in the Red Sea,
Mhm.
and then we take them, and then we see what are the available products we can create. If it is not enough yield, for example, then we go to our preferred species and see where we can source them.
Mhm. Great, great. Thank you so much. I would go to the next question. So it's a little bit like open, but still love to hear your perspective on that.
Of course.
So when we talk about this new or like it's a known material or known organism, known plant that we can, however, use in new ways or more mass production, scale the production of how we utilize that. How is climate change and the changing conditions of the oceans, temperature, salinity, etc., endangering or being a risk towards algae or seaweed cultivation?
Yes, this is really great question. So we have in our team the climate change expert. So I think it is like the topic of a separate
Talk.
hours of the workshop. But we are researching also. So we are creating hydrodynamic models of the farms to understand how it can impact in general. So there are two ways. What we believe that algae impacts the climate and climate impacts algae, right? So it is in the both ways. So first of all, of course, and I must say it, why it is important to farm it and to have it in a controlled way, because of the blooming, right? Blooming happens when the water reaches certain temperature. For certain species, they start to bloom, and this can be already considered as the invasion. This is what happened with the sargassum bloom in the California, for example, in the coast of the California. However, there is also we see it's our hypothesis now, so we still need to research on this, and we really invest a lot on that the algae can cool down the temperature of the water.
Mhm.
So it can cool down the temperature as well as the reduce acidity of this.
Mhm.
So it means that we can store the carbon from the ocean into the product. So
Mhm.
if we don't take now the full supply chain, value chain, in sense of the bioethanol, where we put it back in the system, but however we reduce the emissions because it
Mhm.
is a bioproduct, because it's a biofuel, so it's
Mhm.
still have some balance there. But
Mhm.
we also can store this carbon from the ocean into the bioproducts, into the building, and to the fibers, into the plastic, for example, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and in this sense, I think that the algae, it can be really, if it is only controlled way,
Mhm.
a farming and control way, in the monitored way, it can have a really high impact. However, the climate change, um, and for us the changing of the temperature,
Mhm.
it can impact a lot in sense that we'll have the lower growth period for
Mhm.
algae, because the temperature will rise, right? So the acidity will rise, and then the blooming can happen faster. So this is the assumptions that we have right now, not only our assumptions but also the research that been done like
Mhm.
for. But in, I think, in 1 or 2 years we can create already the climate models that can actually show the impact of the climate on the algae, as well the algae on the climate conditions. So, and I hope we can then share it like in 1 2 years when we have the available data for this.
Mhm. So this is amazing, and really, I mean, what it highlights is the complexity of the system, and yeah, it's really the approach, farming for a new material, and what are the conditions that we are already in. We know they are progressing. You mentioned temperature
Of
increase,
course,
but
of
what is
course,
also like the mitigating effect of farming the product? So it's a
of
very,
course.
very
Of
interesting.
course, and it has to be researched in the controlled way, and also like we are not pioneering for the fact that now we need to replace everything by algae. It always happens like this. You find some new nice solution, and then it just like uh, everyone is super excited, but then like something happened, and then like not good. So we are really for the diversifying things. It's just the part of the solution, just something that can be
Mhm,
done. So,
mhm.
and we need to research on this, and we need to understand how it can impact, what are the risks, and how we can mitigate the risk. So it has to be very conscious use of this. So rather than just being excited and grow algae everywhere.
Exactly. We hear that everywhere, and with every segment, it's the same. So I really love the point also, and I would like to highly appreciate that what you mentioned, that it should not compete with food production. This is
Yes,
something that we hear a lot, basically, when talking about broad plantations. All sorts of stuff are being discussed for bioremediation, carbon capture, but really the strategic approach, the market dynamics, this all has to be considered, and also the impact beyond the boom of carbon credits, and
of course. Of course, and
everything
it
connected to that.
also avoids deforestation, right? Because what we are competing with the monomers is basically the ethanol or ethylene, like corn-based, so maize-based, sugarcane-based. So we see it's a lot in Brazil that so
Mhm,
much forest is cut for the land. If you think it's just insane, right? So the forest is cut for the land to prepare the land to grow corn to create the ethanol. I mean, of course, it's like a technical corn, but you still can feed animals with this. You still can do like it's a big part of the agriculture, and
mhm,
then you create the ethanol, you create the fuel out of this. So, and this is something that should be a little bit like diversified, a little bit like reconsidered. And in sense of algae, it's a little bit more complex process because there are another type of sugars that is created out of the corn. It's a little bit more complex, so it has to be like added one additional step for the treatment. But after the sugar is broken down into the simple sugars, the same facility for the ethanol can be used. The same petrochemical facility for ethylene can be used for this. So, and this is what we are aiming for, not to create invent something new, but rather use what already exists
mm.
to create the added value.
Great, great point. So let's go into the next question. So, are there any regulatory concerns or considerations, legal considerations, that potentially, upcoming seaweed farmer would or should make or have?
Well, the in general, let's see. There are two aspects on this. Okay, so the first aspect is the farming itself and the blue carbon credits. So what we're seeing now, in terms why it is hard to scale up nowadays, because there is only voluntarily carbon market. So unlikely for the like for the trees, for example, in the green carbon market for the growing forest, blue carbon obligatory doesn't exist nowadays. It exists maybe like somewhere in Asia, in Japan. We know it's somewhere like in the US a little bit, but mostly it's the voluntary carbon market. But what we're seeing now that, of course, uh, we cannot offset, we cannot reach our goals until 2050 that we have nowadays,
Mhm,
and we see that there is now rising interest of the credits, the official carbon credits for the algae. So the World Resource Institute, for example, created now a new white paper where the algae farming was listed as the CO2 offset for ocean,
mhm,
and we hope that it will come quite soon. In terms of the regulations, we also hope and aim that the algal biomass will be
mhm,
included in the red directives. So the red directive, renewable energy directives, as the sustainable feedstock. It's not considered yet as the sustainable feedstock, and we really hope that the policymakers will see that and they'll then include it. You see, it's a lot of like talking is happening around,
mhm, mhm,
but why it's not this pushed far yet? Because it's not there is no legislation. So or few in some countries on the national level rather than the international level.
mhm,
So and then we hope that it will come soon. So the blue carbon market as well as the algae will be considered as the sustainable feedstock.
mhm. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, we tend to repeat that also, the situation which we see now in solar or green
Hmm.
roofs, or what you have, basically going through the same boom, wind farms as well. So they were kind of ahead of the curve. The
Yeah.
curve is now kind of, exponentially growing, so it's going faster, bigger than expected, and the legislation is catching up to make it easier for people to kind of locally, set with their solar, whatever companies to implement it. Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing, and it's important to kind of think ahead, prepare for that, still invest in the research. I mean, you mentioned it, the areas which are open or kind of, not so clear, and also flagging the risks transparently and kind of planning with that. So it's very important also for business, but apparently also for the impacts that we kind of have as a goal to mitigate when talking about the climate crisis. So let's go into the next question, and we are kind of approaching the last few minutes of our talk. So let's use that.
Hmm.
Uh, when we talk about the top applications for seaweed, can you maybe share with us? This is really like what we should eventually look at. Maybe this needs more attention. What can you share with
Yes.
us?
Yes. So nowadays, the seaweed is widely used, for example, for food, animal feed, fertilizers, alginates. So all the gels. So this is like the market that we have nowadays, mostly. So forgive me if I forgot something, but this is what my attention is drawn to.
Hmm.
In our side, what we see is the biofuel. So it is the bioethanol. So here I just want to tell explicitly, it's not the biodiesel, it's not the microalgae, so the small algae that is used is completely different topic and different thing. But
Hmm.
for us, it's the bioethanol, and of course, it's plastic and packaging,
Hmm.
building materials. So this has a very high potential, and as well as the fibers. So
Hmm.
those are things that creates the higher value, and
Hmm.
I think a lot of things for the petrochemical industry for monomers. So you can extract different interesting monomers there that can defossilize industry, that can reduce the toxicity of the fossil-based monomers. So those are different applications that we're also looking
Hmm.
into.
Amazing. And thank you so much for sharing now, building materials and fibers. This is where we all get excited in
Yes. Yeah.
Frogeex.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about built environment and architecture and what you have. So very interesting topics. And now let's go, however, to the geographical situation in terms of the seaweed movement. Let's call it movement.
Hmm.
It's always a fancy word.
Yeah.
So, so how does it look in terms of geographies? What regions you see are investing heavily into seaweed application? What countries are maybe like the leaders in this field? Where do you see the action is happening?
Yeah. So of course it is Asia. So basically the Japan and China, but they've been harvesting seaweed for centuries. So because this is their core thing, so they use it for many applications, but it's more like, let's say, like the traditional part.
Hmm.
Nowadays there are also many farms in Africa, so in the coastal region, like in Africa. And however, I see a lot of course, there are some countries in Europe. So we see Denmark, Scotland, that are also moving in this direction.
Hmm.
Some smaller application, maybe north of France, for cosmetics, so or like alginates, and of course Brazil. So Brazil has also a lot of seaweed farms. Our aim is to start building in the Emirates, so in the Middle East, because it is a perfect region. So because it has the sea, so it has the perfect temperature. It's quite warm, but it's still good for seaweed to grow, and it
Hmm.
doesn't have storms and crazy waves there. So it's just a perfect environment to have seaweed farms, and
Hmm.
this is where we see an opportunity. So there, as well as in the coast of Africa, so Kenya, Tanzania, they have. But the
Hmm.
biggest market is, of course, Japan, China, Vietnam, so Asian markets. So
Hmm.
we also hope to see it soon in other places. But In some places, seaweed considered as invasive species and something bad that you have to fight with. We'd
Mhm.
rather propose maybe not fight, use it for something more valuable.
Yes, yes, it's a complete change of the perspective and kind of, but you need data to be able to
Of
say
course,
what can you use it for, what are the benefits, what are the downsides of the application in scale, what is the
of course.
scale that is good or suitable for the region, for the value chain, and the sourcing and what you have. So very, very interesting topics that you connect here. But maybe just to close off this, because we're a little bit over time. I
Yeah.
hope you forgive us and enjoy the information that Dr. Elvira Rakwas is sharing with us today. What are the top resources in terms of information that you would maybe recommend for people that would like to get up to date on what is a little bit happening in this sector, to read or go through or follow?
I would recommend to follow topics on the seaweed on LinkedIn. So I would say that there are so many companies that already do a lot of research. I mean, there is no like a book on the seaweed. There are like various things on the technology. It depends on like what you want to see. But if you, let's say, follow, as it fancy now to say, hashtags on the blue economy,
Mm-hmm.
seaweed cultivations, and carbon credits also in the blue economy, plastic from the biomass. So
Mm-hmm.
if you just follow those topics on LinkedIn, this is like what we follow all the time, and see the news.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's very interesting. So on our website on Algiscope, we are planning also the news section, so the feed, so you can go on our website soon and check it out, or just connect also to me on LinkedIn. So we are posting also some information on the news about it.
Wonderful, wonderful, and definitely, I mean, that is also something to add. Definitely to follow Algascope for more information on this topic. I mean, a very, very a logical
Mhm.
step, I would say. So, with this, I would say we covered all the questions that we had for today planned. Thank you so much, Dr. Elvira Rakwa, for taking the time on your holiday, spending the morning with us and sharing, your expertise in this field, and looking forward to do more together on this topic and also explore this field.
Thank you so much, and I was really happy to share my passion to bio-based materials. So, and if any one of your listeners or viewers want to connect or have a question, so please just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer and to talk about it.
Super. You can also, of course, just a little or big announcement in the end. You can, of course, also find Algascope with us on Frogeex.
Yes.
Really happy to have you as a member of also the community, being able to exchange on topics and kind of do things differently. So thank you so much again for your time, and I wish you a great rest of the day for everybody. And I see you on the next one.
Thank you very much. Thanks.